Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Sommers. I'm the president of the Pacificus Group, and we are experts on workplace conflict resolution. And for our inaugural podcast, I'm here with a wonderful human being, a friend, an amazing lawyer, and I'm proud to say a member of our board of advisors, Chris MacLeod. How are you, Chris?
Never better. Thanks for having me, Daniel.
My pleasure, my friend. So, could you please, for those in our audience who will be watching who don't know you, could you give us a bit of background about who you are and what you've done?
Absolutely. So obviously my name's Chris MacLeod. I practice law and founded with my two partners the firm Cambridge LLP. We're a boutique commercial litigation firm and also some estate litigation and estate planning. But so professionally a lawyer, though I also have a health condition, cystic fibrosis, which is obviously a genetic condition, had it since birth, and have had some health challenges, as everyone with the condition will. But it spurred me to write the book, Beating the Odds. I don't know if you can see that without reflection.
Yeah, I can see that.
So it's just come out in the past month, and the book's entitled Beating the Odds, 11 Lessons to Overcome a Health Crisis and Lead a More Resilient Life. I think resiliency is something that you and I have spoken a lot about.
Yes.
And your new corporate endeavor, Pacificus, really focuses on resiliency.
Absolutely.
And, CF, when I was born in 1969, I'm now 51. Life expectancy for someone with CF was 4. Then it went to 6 to 8 to 12 as more medications and innovative treatments became available. Somewhere in the 50s now, I stopped paying attention.
You're setting new benchmarks yourself.
That's right. I always kind of ride the curve. It's like law school. You just got to stay ahead of the curve and you can get through. But one of the secret ingredient to beating the odds when you've got a health condition is resiliency. And that's really what I try in my 11 lessons. These are lessons that I've just sort of picked up over the years and focus on tools, tactics to survive a healthcare crisis, particularly when you're in a hospital, which is an acute incident. And I've, over the years, read and listened to virtually every self-help book, I'm sure, an author out there. But they're always focused really on sports and business. And there was a bit of a vacuum, at least that I had found, of focusing on how do you really hone in the skills required in a health crisis. Because, there's so much of in the healthcare crisis is out of your control. You can't just have a great attitude, though it's essential. There's factors there that are beyond your control. So that's what drove the book, and a particular incident where in 2012, when I was 42, I hit the wall. Lung function dropped below 30%. Below 30%, you're in line for a lung transplant.
Okay, why don't we just sort of interrupt? But
Yeah, no problem.
People may not actually understand what cystic fibrosis is and how it affects the body, and that background may be helpful as you go into talking about what you've been through.
Great, good point. So cystic fibrosis is a genetic condition. In my case, it affects the delta 551 gene. It's there's a defect on that gene. In other CF patients, it's delta 508, but the symptoms are all the same. You can't digest your food, so you have to take enzymes to digest your food, and your body, as a result of chloride and salt actually basically getting through the membranes in the DNA, your lungs build up with fluid, which causes infection, which causes hospitalization. And more, it's the lung issue that really gets people, and why you need a lung transplant when your lungs function falls below 30%. So it's really lungs and digestion is where the challenge lies. Enzymes to digest, and then constant infection that you're always battling. And it just wears away at the lungs, and eventually, they give in after years of infection. Although sometimes it's not even years. I mean, back in the day, obviously, 40-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 12-year-olds were succumbing due to, and it wasn't of their making, they had phenomenal attitudes. But, when you're constantly in a battle against infection, it can take you down. So that's what CF is. And going back a paragraph to my 2012, I've had a few health crises, but the 2012 was particularly bad. I went into the hospital and less than 30% lung function after weeks, literally weeks plural. Went in June, out for a little reprieve, back in August. By the end of September, doing treatments, 24-hour drip intravenous antibiotics, nothing was moving. I went from the high 20s to maybe 32. And so my doctor said, came in my room one day and said, Chris, good news and bad. Good news is your gene type. We have now, there's a company in Boston, Vertex Pharma, that has a drug that will normalize this defect.
Wow.
Challenge, it's not yet in Canada, and it costs a lot of money. My private insurance ultimately kicked in when the drug was approved to enter into Canada. But to bridge that gap, the company gave it to me on compassionate grounds. Within 10 days of getting on that medication, Daniel, I went from 30% to 60.
Lung function.
Lung function, yeah, 30% to 60% lung function.
That is a dramatic shift.
Well, and like I was back to work and on the field full time. I'm here now at my law firm with, we've got 20 lawyers at the firm now.
Mm-hmm.
So back playing and back in the field of life. So that's what I call a miracle drug. And that was a break that I got in the game. But that particular stay had me pen down the 11 lessons that really help cultivate resiliency to weather those storms until you get the break. You never know when the break's going to come. Mm-hmm. In my case, it came with the drug Kalydeco in 2012. And actually, yesterday we had a huge victory. The newest drug to cover all the other patients was just approved by Health Canada.
I heard.
And the governments have actually negotiated the price. So that drug will be made available, I hope, by Labor Day. Good. Which is phenomenal.
And that's due to, I think, your hard work as head of a cystic fibrosis advocacy group, isn't it?
Yeah, well, in part, there's obviously thousands of families have been advocating in the CF Get Loud, CF Canada. My organization is the CF Treatment Society. Canada, by the way, is the last country in the world to approve Trikafta. It's an abysmal record. It's just shameful. But let's take pause and acknowledge that the government has now gotten a deal done. The drug is approved in Canada, so it's got a drug information number, which is just absolutely remarkable. It'll empty out the hospitals.
Good.
Of CF patients that need acute treatment.
So let me ask you this. You've written this book. What motivated you to write this book in the first place? Because there's so many books, I would think, that deal with, self-help and attitude. So what motivated you to throw your hat in the ring with this book?
A great question. It started with a doctor in 2012 who came in, a resident who said to me, geez, Chris, you seem to have a really positive outlook. This was in the dark days when I was on 4 liters of oxygen a minute. And he said, what's your secret? And so I jotted down that day, just quickly, what then has now become the 11 lessons. Right. And I was always meaning to do something with these 11 lessons, put in sort of fuller form, like a manual, not so less a book than a manual, like a reference book to help people in challenging times. So 2 things. One, there wasn't a lot, I didn't think, or at least I wasn't aware of it, in the self-help book space dealing with healthcare, like a health crisis, where it's usually not of your making. And 2, we were in the middle of the COVID crisis and everyone was in lockdown mode. Well, COVID is eerily similar to CF. CF people have had to be 6 feet apart for the last 20 years because not that we are contagious to anybody else, it's a genetic condition, but there's a particular bug that only CF people would get, and it can be deadly. So CF patients have now for 20 years, you have to wear a mask when you're near a CF person and you have to stay 6 feet apart. Well, that's kind of become the new norm after COVID, right? And people are going on respirators. They're needing a lung transplant and it's killing them because it hits and damages the lungs build up with fluid. Well, that's CF, right, in a different form. And so as people were talking about you just heard the stress and the strain in everyone's voice. People were concerned, they were nervous. I said, geez, maybe this is something at a point in time where I've got something to say to help out. So I said, let's put it down. So I started in November and we finally just put it out last week.
And the core of that were these 11 lessons, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Can you give us an overview?
Yeah, I'll just flip to it right now.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So This is, as you can see, it's kind of short and punchy. This is meant for somebody who may be lying on their back in a hospital. They don't want to be reading War and Peace,
No.
as great as that book may be, right? They want a short, tight, punchy lesson with some anecdotes in it. At least that's what I would want as I was sitting there.
That makes sense.
So, lesson one, attitude is everything. Two, be the CEO of your own health, right? You're ultimately in charge. Power in your response. You can't control what happens to you, but you have ultimate dominion over how you respond to it in any circumstance. Live in day-tight compartments. Well, that's critical because you can't worry about tomorrow. You can't fret about the past. Easier said than done, but you need to live as though 24 hours in a day. I mean, the genius of it, every day starts afresh. It's a new kick at life. It's easier to say live in day-tight compartments, but just focus on your task for the day. And it can be very, it's a tough skill to master, and I'm still working on it, but you need to live in day-tight compartments. Dream big, write it down. You need to think bold and big while you're in a hospital and write it down. I wrote it down on the whiteboard in the hospital room. Get up, dress up, show up. 90% of life happens when you least expect it. Power of prayer, regardless of what faith background a person may have, or if they don't have a faith system. Power of prayer, in my submission, is a critical ingredient. Smiling and laughing. You got to smile, you got to laugh. It's all humorous, especially in the hospital. I got 100 funny stories from the hospital.
Sure.
Never give up, ever, under any circumstance. It sounds trite, but it's critical. As Babe Ruth, I think, said, the trouble with people who don't give up is you can't beat them. They just keep coming at you.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, my mantra that I've adopted from my dear friend Dennis Mills, never better. Whenever you say, someone says, how are you doing? If you say never better, pause. It empowers you and it empowers the person who hears it. Oh, wow, you're never better than you ever know. It's a frame of mind.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, choose to live your life always. So those are the sort of the summation of the lessons. Then I go into anecdotes on each one. And I got some pictures in the middle, but this one I find particularly interesting. This is a picture of me, if you can see it, on 4 liters of oxygen.
I barely recognize you.
Oh, it's 4 liters of oxygen a minute in St. Mike's Hospital, 2012. Pan to, I was actually, occasionally you still have to go in even if you're on a miracle drug. I was in hospital in April. Last time I was there was 2018, and before that was 2012. So in 9 years, twice. But irony of ironies, okay, I'm sitting in St. Mike's in the very same room where that picture was taken as an inpatient. I was there for a 3-week stint during the height of the pandemic of COVID. And the picture on the back of the book is me in the very same room in the very same chair. Can you believe that? So I get the guy who's helping me edit the book, Peter O'Brien, terrific guy. He says, well, Chris, you're going to need a picture from the book. I said, well, no one is allowed in my room and I'm not allowed out. So we got a problem. He goes, just take a selfie.
Right.
So again, I took a selfie, but as you can see the difference being an inpatient on this medication versus the 4 liters 12 years ago.
It's like night and day.
It's insane.
If you hadn't told me that was you, I probably wouldn't have recognized you. That's amazing.
Yeah, so but if you just keep driving forward. I did not know that day that I was going to my doctor was going to come in with good news and bad news. Which one do you want? You just never know where you're going to get the break. And you know what? Sometimes some people don't get a break and they sadly expire, but you don't know that until the end. Exactly. So you just keep driving forward. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what living's for.
Absolutely. And, I know you know this with, also coming from a litigation background, that I can't tell you the number of times I've been in the thick of a trial.
Yeah.
And especially in criminal matters where we have preliminary inquiries and you've already heard evidence from the parties. And of course, in civil matters, you just have discoveries. But, you really think that the deck is stacked against you. And then all of a sudden, a witness says something different than they did before, or they come out with something they didn't say before. Yeah. And all of a sudden, the scales shift in your favor at the 11th hour.
Oh, absolutely.
And same thing with my military background. And my father, Dr. Sommers, also a member of the management team of the company, his military background as well. We're trained that if you're told to hold that line, It doesn't matter how many bad guys are hitting your position. You don't know when your reinforcements are going to come. You don't know what's going to happen,
Yeah.
the part of the battlefield that's going to shift things in your favor. So you always have to have that positive mindset and that positive attitude you're talking about, and never give up until you've got nothing left to give.
Yeah, exactly.
Resilience is also one of our core values at Pacificus, but I'd like to know, why did you focus on resiliency? Part of the title is a more resilient life. So why did you
Yeah.
focus on resiliency?
I think that the essence, the nut of each lesson is resiliency.
Okay.
It's the grit that keeps you going. I mean, the trouble with an illness is it's 24/7. It just doesn't stop. And so people get sick and tired of being sick and tired. The only way to get through that is resiliency. You just have to have grit, because especially with a uh, terminal chronic condition, it doesn't go away. You might get back up, but you still have to deal with it, right? And so people just get sick and tired, literally. So you've got to be resilient. It's the only way to survive, withstand, and then ultimately thrive. You just don't know where a break may come in the game. Got a poster on my wall. Anybody can grind on days you feel good,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
It's when you don't feel good that you just have to keep going forward. And so resiliency is, in my mind, the ultimate trait, if I can call it that you've really got to cultivate.
Mhm.
And you don't need, it's not based on your education, your background. It's everyone has it. They just need to cultivate it, to focus on it, to lean in on it. And it's something I think that you do this at Pacificus, help people cultivate that skill set.
Very
And,
much.
that's what it's all about. I mean, I've penned some thoughts and some verbiage on it, put it into a manual. But ultimately, it's organizations like Pacificus where you can help people, whether they're frontline workers, essential care workers, firemen, police officers, first responders, you name it. You got to focus on resiliency.
Well,
And,
that's a huge part of it, because in our experience, and I know you've also seen this in your work, a big part of what affects the amount of conflict in any organization, whether it's a profit enterprise or a nonprofit enterprise,
mhm,
are people's perceptions of things, right? It's, one
yeah,
person can crack a joke, for example, another person can be very offended by it.
yeah,
One person can maybe flirt with someone else and they think they're flirting in a positive manner, and the recipient of that flirting might feel harassed, right?
yeah,
You always have to be very cognizant and sensitive to how people are experiencing things, their lived experience. But at the same time, we also want to ensure that anyone who's experiencing anything is fostering a positive mindset, like the ones you talked about that are embodied in your rules, in your lessons,
yeah,
they're filtering their experiences through that positive mindset, because
yeah,
we all have a choice. Whenever we experience any negative situation, whether it's in the workplace or outside the workplace, a lot of people say, well, that person pissed me off.
yeah,
Ultimately, at the end of the day, even if the reaction was very instinctual, you can train yourself to respond a certain way to things, even if you're upset at it.
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I'll have good days and bad days. As you said, resilience is not just a fair weather thing. It's really the pedal hits the metal when you're having a bad day and you still need to be resilient.
Yeah,
As a Jewish man, I've actually had the experience of a few people in my life flat out tell me things like, I wish all the Jews had been killed by the Nazis, or all you people
jeez.
go into the ovens, right? And I had a choice there, right? I could respond with
Yeah,
vitriol, I could scream at them, I could try to punch them, I could try reporting them in
yeah,
some fashion to someone. I didn't. I didn't. And I'm not suggesting that what I do is what everyone should do. I'm just giving my own personal example as
yeah,
an example of something you can do, which is this. I look them in the eye and I just say to them very softly, I say, I'm really sorry to hear you say that. Do you mind telling me why you feel that?
mm,
It totally disarms them. Obviously, there's some people who adhere to this ideology who are violent and aggressive and that kind of thing. But, if people aren't like that, it disarms them, because they're probably used to people responding very negatively, very vitriolically to them. Maybe
yeah,
they get off of it. Maybe they have a psychological need for conflict. Who knows, right?
yeah, yeah,
They're not used to that. They're not used to a Jewish man, because sometimes I wear my yarmulke, and people know I'm Jewish and that kind of thing.
yeah,
They're not used to that, and it disarms them. And you can engage with them. And I found it's far more effective to not respond with vitriol, even if I'm upset, even if I'm offended.
Yeah, yeah.
And to me, that's an aspect of resilience. I'm resilient enough. I'm confident enough in myself, my abilities, my people, my faith, whatever,
Mhm,
that I can meet these people. I can look them in the eye and meet their hatred, meet their
mhm.
negativity in a productive fashion. And again, I'm not suggesting you have to be productive with people like that.
No, no, for sure,
But,
yeah.
but especially if it's people in a work environment, again, I'm not suggesting any workplace should tolerate any employee saying these things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I'm talking about the process. I'm talking about the reaction. So does what I'm describing, does that kind of fit in with your idea of resilience and how people should respond to these sorts of issues?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, everyone has their own way to respond to a challenging situation.
Mm,
And that's the only thing you've got dominion over is how you respond, right? Every time something happens to anyone, they've got a choice.
mm.
And you just described a powerful, unique approach that you've taken that's been effective. But whatever people do, they have to take ownership of how they respond,
Right.
right? It's the only thing you can control. Whether you, in the health context, it's, are you going to roll over and cry and be sad? You might. It might be partially a legitimate response, but you've got to own that response. Dave Goggins, have you read Dave Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me?
I haven't read it, but I've seen interviews with Mr. Goggins. And
He's an incredible guy.
yeah, for those who don't know in our audience, Dave Goggins is a retired US Navy SEAL. And I have that right, Chris, right? I'm not
Well, he's both a Navy SEAL,
right.
he was a Ranger, he'd gone through the elite wing of just about every branch, and now he runs ultra marathons at a really tough upbringing. His book is Can't Hurt Me.
Okay.
And he's got this one, I actually quote him in the book, where he talks about when you're absolutely out of steam and you've got nothing left, that's when you've actually got 40% left.
Okay.
That's the essence of it, right? You've just got to keep going. It's like when I got the access to Kalydeco. I had no idea I had this Delta 551 gene. I didn't even know. And the reason I didn't know because no one told me just what didn't matter. There was no treatment that targeted your gene type. It was a academic exercise in the research labs. It's all about, as you say, the only thing you have total dominion over in this life is your response. I mean, actually, speaking of Dr. Viktor Frankl
Yes.
and Search for
Yes.
Meaning,
Meaning.
one of my favorite books, mandatory reading for everybody, in my view. Actually, I believe he was a psychiatrist, and he went into Auschwitz. He was captured, and thrown.
He was put there by the Nazis. He didn't go willingly, but
Obviously, yeah,
he took the opportunity to sort of continue his research, so to speak, by speaking to his fellow prisoners.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I think that's exactly the kind of thing you're talking about with Dr. Frankel.
yeah. I've got him in my recommended reading at the back of the book.
Good.
But you're right. He was captured and thrown into a concentration camp, and really in the book talks about the different reactions people had, and he nails it. I mean, he really sums it up well. You can control your response to horrific situations you face,
Mm,
right? That I think gets to the nut of resiliency, right?
absolutely.
Yeah, well, the Stoics, the ancient Greek and Roman philosophers, talk very much are about controlling your response to a given situation. And your response can be to never give up, to stay never better, to get up, dress up, show up, focus on and hone in your attitude. You got to work harder on yourself than you do on anything else in this lifetime.
It's interesting that you, through your own personal experience, you've come to a lot of these conclusions that are reflected in a tremendous amount of ancient and historical wisdom. So
Yeah,
I think that shows the value and the correctness of the lessons that are in your book. So I know I mentioned to you a little while ago that I'm looking forward to my signed copy.
yes. I wish we were doing this in person because I've got literally hundreds of books sitting beside me right now at the
I'll have
office.
to swing by your office at some point to pick up my
Yeah,
copy.
yeah, please.
Things get back to normal. We're due for a drink or dinner or something.
Absolutely, Daniel.
So, where can people, if they want to learn more about you, more about the book, can you tell people where to find you online?
That's terrific. Thanks. Yeah, www.beatingtheodds, Beating THEODDS.ca. So beatingtheodds.ca. Right now, it's the only place you can actually pick up a copy of the book.
Okay.
And then we can ship it out, or you can drop by at 333 Adelaide Street West, Toronto, fourth floor. Big Sky Publishing, but it's self-published. I set up Big Sky Publishing to
Okay.
publish this book,
Smart man.
and it's housed at my law firm, Cambridge LLP. So if
Okay.
you come to 333 Adelaide Street West in Toronto, and you look for Big Sky Publishing, it's not there. It's at the firm, Cambridge LLP. It was funny. Someone I know dropped by. It says you can pick it up when you go online. You pick up Big Sky Publishing.
Right.
A guy I know showed up. He said, "Gee, Chris, I didn't mean to bother you at work. I thought I was dropping by a publishing house."
Well, there you go. So it's co-located, but people can order it online and it can be shipped, right?
Absolutely, anywhere in the world.
Because we're a global company, so
Yeah,
and I'm so happy to have you on. I'm so happy to have this discussion with you. I am awed by your strength and your resiliency. And, when people are more resilient in the context of what we deal with in Pacificus, when people are more resilient, there's less conflict because people are less sensitive to things. They're more easily able to deal with things and address them
yeah,
in a positive, healthy fashion. And when we communicate well, when we do so from a place of resilience and positivity, in our experience, that results in organizations, companies, government agencies, what have you, that just work better and people are happier and healthier. And it's just better.
yeah, for sure. Well, Jim Rohn, ROHA, and he's one of the first guys in the sort of school of self-help in the U.S. Like Tony Robbins and a lot of the people were actually students of Jim Rohn's.
Okay.
So he always coined a phrase, and I just loved it, which is work harder on yourself than you do at your job.
Oh, I like that.
What he's getting at is, look, you've got to keep working on yourself,
Mm.
not just physically, but mentally. He's honestly, Google him and watch him on YouTube. He's really old school. He's got his Sharpie and a whiteboard, and he sits there and it's sort of old sage Midwest advice. He grew up as a farm kid, and it's just really practical. But he always said, always have a blank notebook, and I always have one. Kids used to say to him, "Dad, why do you spend $20 on an empty notebook?" He said, "Because the stuff I put in there is priceless."
There you go.
Always have a pen and paper and take down the valuable lessons you learn from everybody around you. I mean, you can always learn something from someone.
Absolutely. Yep. 100%. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time today. I'm sure that we'll be talking more in the near future.
Absolutely.
Uh,
And good luck with Pacificus. You're doing phenomenal work. It's a great organization. I'm proud to be on the board of advisors and look forward to great things.
all right. Thank you. And thank you to our audience. Thank you for watching. And we are Pacificus, and we're here to make a more peaceful world. Take care.